Welcome to this episode of Level with Emily, featuring a conversation with composer Darren Korb about his music for the game Hades. Hades, the 2020 roguelite from Supergiant Games. Now, in addition to doing the absolutely fantastic music, Darren also voiced the main character, Zagreus. And he voiced another character called Skelly, who plays a pretty big role and helps you out in the training room, among other nefarious things. Full disclosure, this interview took place in November of 2021 and is just now seeing the light of day for various reasons. We're very glad to share it with you now, but unfortunately there's no video of this particular conversation because November 2021 is right before we started actually making sure we were capturing video of these conversations we've been doing for so very many years. So apologies about that. But back to Hades. It is such a wonderful experience. I love this game. The story gets deeper and deeper with each run you do. The other Olympians who mostly help you along the way are fabulous. And I really just loved all the characters in the game. And the music, of course, is great. It gets really metal at times, which is awesome. But I also appreciate the acoustic Mediterranean instruments that Darren uses to kind of bring us to that underworld world of Hades. Ashley Barrett is back to sing, just like she did on Bastion, Transistor, and Pyre. And Darren also brought in a couple of shredder guitar players to amp up one version of the final boss battle. I am, to this day, on Hades, one trophy away from Platinum. It's been many months since I've played it, so I really should get back into it and try and knock that out before the release of Hades 2, which hopefully will be happening soon. Join us on Discord. That link is down in the show notes. Of course, subscribe to us here on YouTube. We normally have videos of our chats. And then if you can support us financially, you can do that over on Patreon, patreon.com/level. All right, here is Darren Korb talking about his music for Hades.
Hades is a roguelite, technically, where it's a game where you play until you die and you start over. But you retain some progress from run to run, so that's what makes it a roguelite. You play as Zagreus, the son of Hades, and the lord of the underworld, and you're trying to escape your dad's realm because he's a real jerk, and you want to get to the surface. That's sort of where you are dropped into the game at the start.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a ton of repetition, like you say, but it's handled in just really creative ways, in my opinion. So how did that repetition play into then the soundtrack?
That was something that I really was conscious of when composing for it and deciding how to implement the music, because I knew that we were making a game that players could play infinitely, essentially, or for hundreds of hours if you wanted to, and I was only going to write a couple hours of music, give or take. So how can you make that interesting the entire time that a player is playing it? How will you make it so they don't get sick of the music? And partially, one of the ways that we decided to tackle that was by implementing the music as sort of randomized, semi-randomized stems, basically. So, for example, just the sort of music that plays when you're fighting through the various biomes of the game, each one has 3 sections that can loop and then advance to the next section after a certain number of chambers or when a certain type of event happens, right? So there's like a really kind of anticipatory, kind of pulsing, quiet section that begins each piece that can play. It's got some shakers, light percussion, it has like a pulsing bass, and it has like some pads, on 3 separate stems. It's got like what we call a guitar stem, a bass stem, and a drum stem, essentially containing those 3 components. And so what'll happen is that first section will loop for a few chambers, and then it will advance to the sort of song proper, the piece properly, which is the sort of folk arrangement of the piece with sort of Mediterranean folk instruments, more active percussion, real bass happening, and that's the full structure of the song, and that will loop until you get to a mini-boss or a boss, and then it will kick into a hard rock version of that same that same piece. And the way the stems work is that they can play, essentially when you enter a chamber that has enemies, the drums will play, and then some combination of the other two stems or zero of the other stems will play. So it's either, and it's randomized, each chamber, and each one, the only requirement is it has to be different than whatever happened in the last chamber. So every single chamber, you're getting a slight sort of remix of how the music is playing back. And the idea is that the combination of the drums turning on and off to sort of score the fighting, the piece advancing through the sections as your run increases in intensity and as you get deeper into the run, and the randomization of the stems playing back, all that combined will help you experience the pieces in very different ways, even if you're hearing them for the 100th time, the 10th time, the whatever, and so that combined with having some pieces that play, like, for example, when you start a run, that piece will play 100% of the time you start a run. And it'll play for the first few chambers. Because we wanted to have some themes, and then we wanted to have sort of, some aspects of it that are more randomized, kind of like the rest of the experience, is semi-randomized, So, in a nutshell, that's sort of how I approached that. It's sort of like it was a big question for me, and that's kind of where we ended up.
Did you handle then implementing? And I mean, so you were very active in that decision-making process.
Yeah, I sort of conceived of the way we might implement it and worked with Greg Kasavin and Gavin Simon to sort of get it all functioning properly. And then, we have a few exceptions to that, right? You get to the shop and the shop music plays, and you get,
Yep.
other things will interrupt it. You get to a story chamber and the story chamber music plays and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, and you mentioned the different biomes, and that's something that's really important in this game as well, because, you start obviously in the underworld, and then you advance to something that's still quite a bit like hell. And then, eventually you get to Elysium, which is very beautiful and colorful in a different way. The whole game is, as very Supergiant, it tends to be very colorful. But Elysium is the closest to Earth, right?
Yep.
And then there's actual Earth. So, talk us through the musical changes as those biomes change. Yeah.
So, each biome, practically speaking, has a playlist of tracks available for that biome, essentially, and it'll just kind of go through them and then start over with the next time you get there, or the next time. We do have like a mid-biome switch usually of once you could defeat the mini-boss, that piece will end, and then another piece from that biome will begin. But I tried to give each biome its own identity musically. Tartarus is very... It's got kind of a maze-like quality, and it's sort of like, tight shifting chambers, and I wanted it to have... There's some of the weirdest time signature stuff is happening in Tartarus. In particular, the track Out of Tartarus, which has mostly a 21/8 compound meter as the time signature, which is pretty funky.
Is that the one? Because I know there's one that goes 4/4/4/4/5/8. Maybe that's that one.
Well, this like da 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 da
yeah.
Yeah. So it's you can
so
count it.
Fun.
You can count it a bunch of different ways. But
exactly.
I count it like I count it like it's like I guess I count it as it's just I count it as 21/8. I don't know.
That's awesome.
Like 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 is how I count it.
Word. I was on my walk the other day trying to count it out. Finally, I'm like, listen, just use your fingers. God.
Yeah.
I love that.
Some of them are more straight ahead, but I wanted that one. I really tried for that one. I wrote all those pieces starting with the folk instrument arrangement of it.
Okay.
And use that to sort of lead in that biome. For Asphodel, that one is the one that's more like proper hell, like lava, like magma and just like burning stuff and skeletons, and it's more like it's got more of that vibe. So I wanted there to be big, like I have like a wink and a nod to Diablo 2 with the big like big reverbed out toms and stuff and big giant drums that happen throughout. And that one I have like weird percussion stuff. Like I think one of the things I play on one of the tracks is it's like an empty can of La Croix.
Nice.
With a bunch of reverb on it. I'm like tapping on it with my fingers.
Sweet.
And things like that. So I wanted there to be some unease to that. Coupled with the sort of big giant drums that I associate with that kind of thing, big reverbed out drums. And that one has more like I would describe the riffs as more serpentine, if that makes sense.
That's the Hydra level.
The Hydra,
too.
yes. So I wanted to kind of like lead to that musically, if that makes sense. A lot of the riffs are more, for lack of a better word, snaky. I don't know.
Melismatic, maybe?
Yeah, there you go. Sort of like winding riffs and so that was sort of what I used for the identity for myself for that biome. And then for the following biome, Elysium, I wrote all of the rock parts first and extrapolated backwards because I wanted to make sure that this piece feels like when you're fighting a minotaur, like that's what like, and then this piece feels, so I kind of tailored those pieces specifically to the boss moments to make sure that those were going to be right. And I wanted those to be the most like kind of straight ahead rockin' pieces. Cause the sort of the enemies you're fighting are like a little bit more righteous in a way. So I wanted that the music to feel a little bit more righteous. And so, that's kind of how mentally I define that stuff. And then Styx, the Styx biome has just the one piece, which is also a very strange time signature, again, to kind of reflect the weird, the snaky, the weird tunnels, labyrinthine kind of tunnels you go through and stuff. And just to make you feel pretty uncomfortable. It's like an icky biome.
It is.
And I wanted the ickiness reflected in the music. I have some really messed up sounds happening in that one, and some weird time signature stuff going on there. course, when you get to the surface for the boss fight, I wanted that particular piece to be reflective of the main theme of the game, to kind of bring it all back. The theme you've heard over and over again, because it's the main menu theme. It's the theme that plays when you die. It happens like a couple other times, so you've heard it over and over and over again. And then it's the boss fight music, So I wanted to kind of bring it all home and tie it all back to that. And then, of course, if you pass the boss fight, there's a change to reflect the surface. I really wanted to change the palette around on the surface, and
much. It's so different.
Yeah, and it's brand new for me too, because it's the first time I've ever done anything orchestral at all. I've never worked with like any players before, so that was a real experience, and I could talk just a whole bunch just about that. But it was a lot of fun. Austin Wintry did the arrangements for me on that one. He helped me with the orchestral arrangements and conducted that session.
Oh wow, cool.
And it was a blast working with him, and as well as the end theme in Blood, and he arranged the orchestral parts for that one and conducted that stuff as well. So I saw an opportunity to really change the vibe there, and to really have that moment be like a big, giant, both as beautiful as possible and like a big sigh of relief, and like a kind of like to reflect the feeling that the player would have getting to that point finally, and that was my goal, and also to really hit home the emotional significance of what's happening there with Zagreus and all of that stuff, and to reflect that. And then the end theme is meant to tie that music, which is the sort of the theme of that character that you meet there after defeating the boss, with the main theme, which is sort of the theme of the boss. I'm trying to be as spoiler-free as possible.
It's all good.
And combine them together, because that's the sort of goal, is to sort of like bring that back together, kind of reunite those two characters.
Yeah. I mean, I think, when I started playing it for the first time, it took me a while to really kind of grasp how long of a game this really is. I mean, and also how I feel like it's structured really well in that you can sit down for 20 minutes and play a run, or 30, something like that. Yeah. You can stop in a run if you want, but pardon me, but it's there's a long game that you want to play there, and that's a And I guess, in some ways, Bastion was like that too. If I really think about it, but in a very different way, right? This game is a little more prolonged in that way.
Absolutely, yeah,
yeah.
Certainly, this is the first time we've tried to make a game like this. We kind of dipped our toes a little bit with Pyre, trying to make a game that was bigger than we'd made before and had more sort of variance and stuff, but we kind of didn't really go fully commit to that idea. And the idea of making a game that you recurse through over and over again, that was part of the goal, was to can we support this gameplay mechanic with narrative, and how much narrative do you need to do that and how do you dole that narrative out in a way that's efficient for you to sort of not just run out of narrative really quickly? And how do you, like, there were all these big questions. And so we ended up, I think, with around 22,000 lines of voiceover.
Wow.
In Hades. And it's a lot for us. You know, it's kind of quite a bit more than we had in any of our previous games. By a lot. and you know, it's one of those things where we just sort of, had we known it was going to be that much when we set out to do it, we maybe like wouldn't have set out to do it.
Yeah.
But just because we did it throughout the process over the course of the 3 give or take development cycle, it just sort of, you know, and we did it in early access, and we just kind of just kept going and going and going and adding and adding and adding, and it sort of added up to this fairly massive narrative experience. You can play for, you know, 100 hours and not really hear that many repeated lines. You know, you're hearing kind of new content for much of that time. Yep. And even if you do play for a ton, like hundreds of hours, there's still some narrative content that like you'll like little special stuff that you have to do very specific things to access. And so there's really a lot of surprises in there for people who are interested in kind of really digging in and stuff. So, and for us, I think part of it is a lot of that stuff is sort of strictly unnecessary. But the stuff that feels like when the player feels like you're looking at them and seeing the specific thing that they're doing, and you respond to that, some of that stuff, even though it is definitely not necessary, some of that stuff is the most exciting, I think, as a player to encounter in a game, when the game is seeing you and really paying attention to what you're doing. And we try to have some of that stuff in each of our games, you know. Even in, you know, in Bastion at the very beginning, when you fall off the edge and the narrator talks about it, and you know, and all that stuff, it's been there from the beginning, but we tried, you know, we really tried to reflect that. You know, there's a thing where you start beating Megara, you know, she says, well, you're only beating me because you're using the mirror. It's not fair, you know. And if you go home and you like turn off all your powers on the mirror, and then you go back and fight her, she'll say something about it. She'll be like, "Oh, all right, a fair fight," you know. So yeah. we really try to, and a lot of that was born out of early access, I think, where we'd have these scenarios that we'd see happening, and we'd want to like support that, you know, narratively.
Want to talk about some specific tracks, but you mentioned just working with the orchestra and how you could just talk about that for a while too, and I'd love to, because I mean, what was that experience like to think, I guess, outside the realm of how you normally compose?
Yeah, you know, it was sort of, it came about in a strange way. Like I had done with Austin, he had sort of helped me produce this 10th anniversary show for Supergiant, which was like orchestral arrangements of songs from the first 10 years of Supergiant. And we did a performance at PAX East, and it was or PAX West 2019, and it was a ton of fun. And we had such a great time with it, and we were so pleased with the arrangements. We thought, oh man, we should record an album of this stuff. That would be awesome. So we ended up deciding to record an album, and it turned out that it made sense for us to record at Abbey Road in London, which was, you know, like a bucket list, incredible dream of mine.
Wow.
And partially to justify that, I was like, well, I should probably write some Hades tracks that we can record there at the same time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought, you know what a perfect, because I was looking for like a very significant palette change when you get to the surface. So this is a perfect opportunity. I can use this as that, you know?
Yeah.
And so I had the idea to write the theme, on the coast for chamber orchestra, and then also to incorporate chamber orchestra into the end theme because of the reasons I mentioned earlier. Trying to combine the two palettes, for the end of the game, and it was such an incredible experience. Working with Austin was a blast. I kind of did a rough mock-up of what I thought for, when I was writing On the Coast. I did my sort of rough mock-up, and Austin kind of sweetened it up a little bit and added some flourishes and did like some more, proper arranging and and same with In the Blood. I kind of mocked up the stuff that I thought should be happening orchestrally, and Austin just kind of sweetened it up and added just rad Austin-y stuff to it. That horn line, that ascending trombone line, that's got Austin's Austin's signature on it. Yeah, he's so great to work with. And because he and I just have very different approaches, and so it's really fun to work with, because we get along really well, and it's very fun to work with someone who has like a very different skill set.
Yes.
From has a whole different area of expertise. So anyway, he conducted the session. I was there. We were at Abbey Road. We recorded the album and those 2 tracks in 2 days at Abbey Road. It was like one of the best things I've ever done in my life. It was in Studio 2, like where the Beatles recorded all of their albums except for one. It was, it was like we did the pictures on the stairs, we like the whole thing. And Ashley and I were just looking at each other like, we can't believe we're here. What is happening? And yeah, I mean, it was just such a delight. And we recorded all the vocals, like live in ISO rooms while the orchestra was so we did, In the Blood and stuff, we recorded there.
Nice.
Vocally as well. So I did the rock tracks before, but everything else was recorded there. And yeah, so it was just such a joy, to have music that I wrote be originally recorded at Abbey Road. I mean, there was a difference between the tracks that were like rearranged and then recorded at Abbey Road, and the stuff that I wrote intending for it to be recorded at Abbey Road by this incredible chamber orchestra. It just felt like a subtle difference emotionally for me, and it was really it was just such a blast to do, and I really am so pleased that I was able to squeeze that in just before the pandemic hit.
Right.
Because if I had, it certainly wouldn't have turned out that way had I waited like 2 more months or whatever. That was in January that we recorded that stuff, January 20th and 21st, I believe, of 2020.
Yeah.
So yeah, just another month or 2 later, month and a half later, there would have been definitely not would have been happening.
Wow.
So yeah, I was pleased to, squeeze that in right under the wire. Yeah.
Right. No kidding. God, what a mess.
Yeah.
You sort of addressed this a little bit, but on the soundtrack itself, some of the tracks are really long, like 8-9 minutes long. So talk about assembling those then after the fact, right?
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are long, partially due to the structure that we decided to go with for the tracks in the game. All the biome pieces have that sort of intro section. They have that folk arrangement version of the piece, and then they have the rock arrangement version of the piece. And both of those sections are the same length usually.
Gotcha.
So what is a intro, like a 30-second intro plus like a 5-minute piece of music ends up being like a 30-second intro plus a 10-minute piece of music because, you know what I mean? So
yes.
So everything's kind of doubled. So, and I deliberately wanted to make the pieces a little bit longer because I I knew the players were going to hear them a bunch, and potentially I didn't really want them to loop much during the course of experiencing the piece. Like they could, maybe loop once or twice, but more than that would be excessive, I feel like, in the course of a run. And it's possible to take a while in certain chambers, especially like when you're just starting out. Maybe you can survive, but you haven't got unlocked like the good boons yet or whatever, and so your damage output's not very high. So I just wanted to make sure that the pieces could stand up to playing for a while. Mm-hmm. So that was part of it. I think the longest piece that to me is a single thought that changes the whole time is God of the Dead. Like I think 9 minutes or something, like that. And it has different sections that are all different music, whereas the other pieces have like a kind of two sections that are essentially the same piece, just arranged differently. And God of the Dead was a ton of fun to put together. I knew I wanted a section that would represent the first phase of the fight. I knew I wanted a section that would there's a little transition between the first and second phases. I knew I wanted a second phase of the fight, which would, kind of crank it up to 11 as much as possible. And then I wanted like a resolution kind of section, cool down, like to cover the narrative moment at the end of the fight. And so, it was fairly clear to me, like the mission, and the first section of the fight, again, it's meant to reflect that main theme of the game, but it's as heavy as possible was my approach. Like I want to take the main theme of the game and just make it rock as hard as I can, and be really like like you're digging in. It's still slow, and it's maybe not what you expect for a boss fight because it is so it's like sludgy to a degree. And then of course the second phase, it really hits the fan, and I want the moment when you sort of see the boss's health bar fill back up to be reflected musically and be like, oh, it's on. Oh no. And so for that second phase, I just I wrote a riff and then like tried to play it. How fast can I play this riff and have it still sound cool? And then I dialed it back about like 10%, and that's the tempo I settled on, for that second phase, Yeah.
Oh, that second phase, the surprise of everyone's face as that happens. You're like, really? Okay. Okay. I guess I'm going to do this again. I guess I'm going to die now.
And if you get to the point where you can turn on Extreme Measures 4,
right,
then that piece kicks in the third phase.
Nice,
which is it's that same moment again, but like turned up to 14 instead of 11.
Oh God, I can't wait for that. I haven't gotten quite that far.
To
have that many of the levels of Extreme Measures dialed in.
Yeah.
But no, that's amazing. I guess on that note, talk to me about your relationship with metal, because this is so much fun to hear. It obviously was so much fun to play. So
it was, yeah.
It's
interesting. Like I'm not much of a metalhead necessarily. Like I do really like certain artists, metal artists. I love myself some Dio. I enjoy like some metal adjacent things. I enjoy some Rush. I enjoy, I like, kind of like some Ozzy and Sabbath and stuff, like kind of proto, like early metal and things like that.
Sure.
Even like Led Zeppelin is sort of like maybe like very kind of early, like hinting at metal, it's like blues forward, like heavy blues, but kind of like contains some of the roots of the metal stuff. So, I'm a big fan of the hard rock stuff, and certainly I do like in particular Rust in Peace by Megadeth is like I really like that album actually. I definitely leaned on some of that for trying to figure out what some of the boss music and stuff like that was gonna sound like. But yeah, I mean I'm not, it's interesting. I became a lot more interested in metal, or I don't want to say tolerant of metal because it implies that I kind of couldn't tolerate it before. But I just was never like, it didn't grab me earlier in life. But over the year, over the past 16 years or whatever, playing a bunch of Guitar Hero and Rock Band, I've actually become like more of a fan of a lot of that stuff because it's fun to, it's music that is designed, I think, partially to just be fun to play. Yeah. And obviously to like, it's supposed to feel, make you feel a certain way and bang your head and everything. And so, I've been exposed to a lot more metal through Rock Band than than if I hadn't played a bunch of Rock Band. So, for me, I became familiar with stuff that I wouldn't have otherwise sought out. Through playing Rock Band for years and years and years. And so, yeah, I mean, I for me, a lot of the heavy stuff is influenced more by like grunge, like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and like things like that. Like, like even though the music I'm making is sort of edging more towards metal, it's a lot of that stuff. That's the stuff that really, like, the heaviness of that music I find to be really delightful. And for me,
slower too. Sorry,
it is
I don't mean to
slower,
interrupt, but much slower.
Much slower. Yes,
grungier.
A lot of it's much slower and grungier. Yeah. Yep. So yeah. I mean, I tried to incorporate. I have a lot of influences there, but I listen to specifically when trying to achieve like a certain type of heaviness. I listen to. I think it's like the first. I forget if it's the first or second Alice in Chains record with William Duvall, like the new singer. Like when they reformed.
Okay.
Like I forget which album it is, but one of those is so heavy. It's like it's just like got such incredible, just like the heaviest riffs and production, and it's just like, and I just had to listen to that, like trying to analyze why it was so heavy and try to figure out how I could make something extremely heavy like this, And so that was an interesting sort of production and writing exercise for me to just like try and like, how can I achieve maximum heaviness? Like, what are the ways to do this in this context, right? With the sort of Mediterranean vibe mixed in there. And so, yeah, I mean, I looked at that stuff, funky time signatures, Soundgarden uses a lot of those, and Rush, of course, does that too. And trying to like figure out a way to incorporate these strange time signatures, because that was a goal I really wanted to incorporate funky time signatures into the game, because they have this propulsive motion, this propulsive feeling to them where you can't rest. Like there's never a spot to rest, 4/4. There's certainly some 4/4 in the game, but just the unease of listening to something in a strange time signature propelling you forward, kind of a feeling of like stumbling, almost falling.
Exactly. Like you're skipping a step.
Yes.
Or you have a shortened step.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I really wanted that to be reflected in the music, and because I thought that would help, reinforce the feeling of playing the game. Essentially, is just enhance the feeling of being on the edge of your seat, this intense combat that was like high stakes combat. So that was part of the goal for me. So I looked at that kind of stuff, and then when I wanted to go full blast on like God of the Dead, Section 2, I looked at stuff like Megadeth and Rust in Peace.
Nice.
As in particular as like my main sort of touchstone for what I wanted to achieve there in terms of craziness.
Yeah, and heaviness and weight. So what are some of the, I guess, tricks isn't really the right word, or maybe techniques that you did kind of learn from to do stuff like that?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know that I can describe any specific thing that I took away. It's more like I was trying to absorb vibes.
Yeah.
And just sort of, if my piece made me kind of make a face and bob my head in a particular way like it did when I was listening to that Alice in Chains record, then I kind of knew I was on the right track.
Okay.
If, for lack of a better description, that's sort of how I gauged it.
Nice. Yeah. While I was doing my homework just to make sure I knew exactly what was what here, I literally had, because I've met you in person. Like I've spoken with you. This is at least the fourth time I've interviewed you.
Yeah.
But yet I had no idea that you were the voice of the main character, Zagreus, or a character who helps Zagreus along the way, this skeleton named Skelly, who's basically like a New York film noir dude, right? So, but Zagreus is, sort of pomp and British-esque and, refined. And but tell me about getting to voice those two characters.
It was a ton of fun. I mean, for Skelly, that was kind of based on a voice that I would just do with my friends for fun. And it was, we figured, well, if we're going to have a talking skeleton, he'd probably sound like this, like this seems like the voice a talking skeleton would have, was sort of like part of the way we approached it. And he was one of the first characters we put in, actually, like really early on. Skelly was a touchstone for like the sort of bounds of silliness of like how silly will this game be at its extremes, And Skelly was kind of a gauge of Skelly and Hypnos were sort of like the outer bounds of that. And so it was based on this voice that my friends and I would do, and there was this, the voice was kind of like this when we do it for each other, it was more like that. But Skelly had to be more up because he was like higher energy, had a lot of information to give. So it ended up being like that kind of plus like a Joe Pesci or something, it was like a, hey, give me all you got, boyo, like, it's kind of like a little more, like a little Skeletor, a little Skeletor in there,
You're getting pretty strong, I'll give you that, boyo. Strong enough to smack a guy like me right up against the wall, and I'd go straight to pieces. Boom!
That was part of where that came from. It was just sort of started in this place that was just funny to us, and then, and then it ended up being a lot of fun to do. And for Zagreus, that one, I kind of happened into playing actually just because we'd gotten some auditions back for the character, and we had an idea of how he would sound, and we experimented with a lot of different things for him, and we tried him not being voiced. We tried him having, just speaking with a kind of an American accent. We tried all sorts of different ideas there, and had several auditions come our way, and we had like a sense of what we wanted him to be like. But we hadn't heard an expression of it that was kind of nailed what we had in mind. So I thought, I'll just try a scratch thing just to see if I can express the thing that I have in my head about this guy. And, things that were on our mind tonally were like Tom Hiddleston's Loki and like maybe like Carrie Elway's in The Princess Bride, or like things like, like stuff like that. There's kind of like had some sort of tonal pinpoints that we could try to figure out how to navigate around.
Yeah.
And so I did a read of that stuff, and people on the team liked it, and we kind of put it in the game and to see how it would feel, and people liked it. And we just kind of went with that. And I sort of assumed I sort of assumed it would be replaced at some point by like when we got a real actor, But then it just like I kept recording more and more and more. I was like, well, it's a lot of Zag stuff in here now. It's gonna be hard to replace, So I just kind of defaulted into it, and it was a blast. I mean, and I've been asked like, oh, was it a bunch of extra work to record Zagreus, and the answer is kind of no, because I direct all the VO sessions anyway. Okay. So I would have had to be in those sessions if somebody else was doing it. Anyway, so it kind of ended up being totally fine, and there were a lot of benefits actually to having that character be like on team, because Greg could write something and I could just kind of go instantly record it, and we could have it in the game in an hour, from when he wrote it.
Yeah.
So that stuff was really cool to be able to turn that stuff around, especially in early access when we wanted sometimes to respond really quickly to things and patch stuff in. And I remember, I think it was our first or second update after we launched into early access, when we introduced the Pact of Punishment. I think at that time it might have been called the Heat system. I forget.
Okay.
But we noticed that there was players weren't really engaging with it because there wasn't a lot of incentive to do so, right? So we introduced the Skelly statues system. We wanted to introduce that. So like it was like a day. It was like Jen did this awesome statue art.
Yeah.
Greg wrote a whole bunch of lines for Zag and Skelly to express this system and explain it. And I went and just recorded all of them real fast.
Because it was like this,
because I have both characters. Yeah. So I recorded, it's probably like 60 or 100 lines or something that they exchanged between the two of them that I went and recorded and just like got them all edited and chucked them in instantly. And then the next day we patched it into the game.
You're just testing me here, right, Kieran? I mean, when you place a huge sum of coin conspicuously within my reach, what do you expect me to do?
Now, do you record at home, or you would go to a studio for that?
So at the time I was recording from the office, we had a vocal booth at the office kind of right next to my desk, and I would just pop into the booth and record that stuff. And now I got I had to get a vocal booth in my house for finishing the project because we worked from home for the last 6 months or so, and I had 3,000 more Zagreus lines to record. So so I had to get a vocal booth for that.
Oh, what a trip!
But it's all just kind of at my desk, essentially next to my desk, and I just pop into the booth when I got to record something, and it's pretty straightforward. I think if we had to go to a studio every time I was going to record stuff, we would have had to approach it a lot differently.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
And just like the previous Supergiant Darren Korb extravaganzas, we've got Ashley Barrett back.
Oh yeah,
singing. So talk to me about the couple of tracks that she's on.
Yeah, well, it was I had a feeling that I knew we were doing Orpheus, and if we're gonna do Orpheus, Eurydice seemed like we should probably do Eurydice, and I'm glad we ended up going that route because it was really fun to write songs from their perspectives and to write kind of about that relationship and then to have them, in the blood is sort of, supposed to be one of their old hits, is the sort of my idea, right, for that. Yeah. And each of their, like, I figured if Eurydice sort of brings out the best in Orpheus and is his muse, then I really wanted that to be reflected, to try to have their sort of combined powers be greater than their separate ones,
Yeah.
And so, it was a ton of fun. I mean, Orpheus has a couple of tunes that he's written kind of after the fact, right, by himself. Mm-hmm. And they have a particular vibe that's a little bit more flowery, a little bit more formal feeling, I would say. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Eurydice has, I think, a more down-to-earth approach, for lack of a better description. And so I wanted that to be reflected in the songs that they wrote, and that when they combine, it's sort of kind of maybe the best of both worlds. It's sort of the grandiosity of Orpheus with the sort of visceral kind of down to earth immediacy of Eurydice stuff.
Voiced the Orpheus, you sang
the Orpheus
tracks, and that's all falsetto, yeah?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. I mean, talk about that, because people might not know what that means.
Yeah, so when trying to decide what Orpheus was going to sound like, there's this character that's supposed to be the best musician ever,
right?
That moved their voice moved the gods to tears, right? So I just it was just something that I needed creatively, I think, to allow me to progress. There was an angle on it instead of trying to approach it head on, which just seemed like folly to me. Just like, I'm just going to write the best music and sing the best, it just seems like a hard way to approach that. And so I wanted him to have an angelic, ethereal quality to his voice. Mm-hmm. And, I thought about like Tom York's falsetto performance on like the song Nude, or, stuff from In Rainbows and stuff, all that stuff. It really has that kind of vibe to me. So I kind of saw the way Orpheus might sing as like if Tom York's falsetto, like that kind of vibe, I wanted to kind of draw on Tom York's falsetto particularly.
Yeah.
For the vibe of that stuff. So yeah, I mean, and that's the idea. Yeah, he sings completely in falsetto the whole time. And I was like, well, he's gotta, because it's this beautiful voice that would move the gods to tears. It's just got to be this angelic sort of presence. And that was my reasoning there.
Yeah. It probably wouldn't be like a Johnny Hartman bass kind of thing.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. No, those tracks are fun.
Awesome.
And I assume you wrote the lyrics, or do you have help with the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wrote the lyrics, yeah.
Okay, nice. And then you also had a couple of guests on the track, The Unseen Ones, and they're special guests. So tell us about those two characters.
Yeah, I was sort of... It was right towards the end of the game. That track came out with the 1.0 release of the game. And we were incorporating... Extreme Measures 4, which is the sort of ratcheted up insane boss fight, essentially, of the end game boss fight. And I had already, I thought, turned the music up to the maximum intensity that I could. And so the original idea was like, well, I got to do something other. I have to like kind of go to make a left turn here. I can't just keep going up because there's no up. But then I thought, you know what? There is an up. The up is like a 4-minute blistering guitar battle, which I am not capable of playing. I'm not a virtuoso enough to do all the necessary wheedlies that this is going to require. And it would take me years to, if I faked it and edited it all together, it would take me years to assemble. I don't have years, so I was asking around some of my friends, like, do you know anybody who could pull off like a Tornado of Souls style 4-minute guitar battle situation, and a friend of mine recommended these two incredible players, just so amazing, and I sent them, we exchanged some Facebook messages or whatever, and they were into it. I sent them the backing track, and I kind of described like, there's like two characters fighting, and I kind of want to represent each character, like one of you, like maybe kind of each represent a character and have this fight, and then you'd come together and play the same thing sometimes, and and it'd be like a 4-minute, it's like a big kind of ask, and they're like, cool, and then they went like it's like a day and a half or 2 days later or something. It was like perfect. It was just, I had no notes. It was just exactly what you hear. They came back and delivered this like masterpiece, this guitar masterpiece. I was like, okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah.
You mentioned way back when we first started chatting about, using some Mediterranean folk instruments. So I'm just curious what you kind of got into in that realm.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the project, I just did a lot of Googling, and I ended up ordering, I got a bouzouki, which is sort of like a giant Greek mandolin, essentially, and it has kind of between a 12-string guitar and a mandolin kind of vibe. And I got that. I picked up a balama, which I'd traveled in Turkey like a while ago, like in 2005. I was in Turkey for a little bit, and picked up a balama while I was there, but I couldn't bring it home with me for various reasons because I ended up having to leave it there. But so I was like, oh, I know, that sounds cool. I'll get a balama. So I got one of those, and I ended up getting a lavta as well, which is sort of like a Turkish lute that has frets, like a fretted. It's got 7 strings with 4 courses, like a bass note, and then 3 courses of 2 strings each that are doubled.
Okay.
With nylon strings, so it's got like a pretty weird, interesting sound. And it's very hard to keep in tune, but it sounds lovely. And so, those are the primary instruments I use to kind of represent the Mediterranean folk thing. And I cheated and incorporated a little mandolin in there too, as a texture sometimes.
Sure.
Just to kind of layer on top.
Yeah.
But I knew that I didn't want to be beholden to only just Greek, just bouzouki, just because I wanted like a pan-Mediterranean sort of thing, because it was kind of, if you go back far enough, it was all kind of one thing anyway. But and I also knew that I wasn't going to try and do like actually ancient instruments, because it just, music has changed so much. Like there's like an aulos and like things that were like 5-note, like little 5-note harps and stuff. It's just like,
or the monochord or something.
It's just not, it's just like, it didn't provide enough options for me creatively. So I decided, like, I looked at that stuff. I was like, okay, this is cool and interesting. I'll try and allow it to sink in and inform what I do. But I'm going to try and do something that feels old relative to now, but isn't necessarily ancient.
Love the music when you go talk to Chaos.
Awesome.
There's these special holes that open and you can go talk to Chaos. And it's just, again, it's very like ethereal, kind of where are you right now world. And that's fun how much the music changes there.
That's awesome to hear. Like that was a really fun piece to write, because it was like, I basically want this to be cosmic, like space music, essentially. It's like, so I tried, I have like, like a cheeky kind of reverbed out, like slide, like delayed out slide guitar, like a la Space Oddity from David Bowie, like stuff like that. I've got this sort of big, huge, spacey synthesizers and stuff, like whooshy, like, just kind of swirling chaos, and so that was, and it's very, as far as the pieces go, that's one of the simplest ones. It's just a few chords, and it's there's no percussion. It's just it's all texture, and it was really fun to make. I made that one like in an afternoon. It was super fun. I had the idea. I was like, okay, here we go. Let's do it. And
and now we're in a planetarium.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, it's great. Well, what else do you want to add about the game or the music or anything?
I mean, I think you touched on it briefly before, but the music for this game was so much fun to make. It was such a delight. It was because it was just like, I think it was the closest to stuff I might just do for fun anyway of all the games, you know?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so that was cool. And for me, the sort of personal challenge of how can I push my rock? How can I push that more? Like even beyond the instinct of where I think that's enough, you know, I want more than that, you know? Yeah. And like, how can I increase the quotient of rock in what I'm making and looking for different ways to do that and try to just, you know, the goal was for a lot of those sort of biome pieces was very similar with each one. Like each one had a different vibe and a different approach to it and, you know, different details. But the goal was sort of, because the contexts are, you know, similar for a lot of stuff. So the goal was really similar, which was just make like a really kind of badass feeling thing to fight to, you know, it's like, how do I do that? Right. Yeah. It was fun to have just so many stabs at that, you know. It was just, I got to just kind of keep doing that, and it was really fun. It's a fun type of piece to make. So yeah, it was a blast. And I think in terms of just like the most fun, maybe God of the Dead was the most fun, because it was sort of the ultimate expression of that. It's like I have to rock as hard as I can. That's my mission here. How hard can I rock? I must rock that hard, you know?
Well, it also ties everything together too, right? And it's such a satisfying payoff to have that theme played out like that. Yeah. So yeah, I can see how that'd be a fun one. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. So yeah, it was a blast. And the, and I'll say, you know, the response to Hades has been really, incredible and overwhelming and mind-blowing and just kind of the way people have connected with the characters and the music and the story and you know and all that stuff has been really incredible. And seeing people, you know, connect with Good Riddance in particular, or you know, songs from the game and it's all the awesome covers I'm seeing, you know, it's just it's really touching and rad, especially given when the game came out, to see that people, you know, found comfort, a way to distract themselves from a lot of the real world atrocities and horrors that were occurring during this time period. Yeah. It was really, it felt really good to hear about a lot of that stuff during this time, because you know, it's a tough time. And I was personally glad to have a thing that I was really deeply buried in, working on for the first 6 months or so of the pandemic, because, you know, it would have been, I think, a lot harder for me to cope with personally had I not had this project not just a project, but a really exciting project that I was really invested in to kind of throw myself at. That was helpful for me, I think, mentally and emotionally at that time.
Well, seriously, so nice to see you and chat with you, and always so great to hear your music. And, I tell you this every time, but I can't wait to hear what's coming next. So
Awesome.
Hopefully you're having on a little break right now, maybe not, but...
Yeah. Trying to take it easy, as much as possible. Yeah. Let's see how it goes. Yeah.
Glad to hear it. All right, Darren. Well, take care of yourself, and it's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Level with Emily. You can learn more about Darren Korb, see a playlist, and support Level with Emily at patreon.com/level. While there's no video for this chat because of when it was recorded before we started doing that, so there's not going to be a video of this particular chat. It is up on YouTube, though, and you can find other videos of ours up on YouTube as well. Please subscribe there to get all our new videos of interviews. I'm Emily Reese. Sam Keenan is our producer. Say hi, Sam.
Hello.
You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Level with Emily and learn more about us at levelwithemily.com. Made possible by Adam Selvage at Tiki Web Services. Composer Brad Gentle manages our YouTube channel. Level with Emily Reese is a production of June Media, Inc. Here at Level with Emily, we're part of the Audio Podcast Alliance. It features a hand-picked selection of the very best podcasts about sound. You can hear the latest episodes from our friends in the community at audiopodcast.org.